welcome to another edition of Turn 6 Garage, and today we're discussing the BMW 3 Series E46. This is my beloved 2002 325i E46 with a 5-speed automatic transmission and 135,000 kilometers. The car that I rescued from the jungle. The car that was left to die and has become, by way of a family friend, of which I am eternally grateful for, one of my personal favourite cars I've ever owned. So, while I love this and while I am into old Euros, should anyone who's interested in buying a car like this really go after an E46? Is this car worth the effort? Is this car a good idea? And is this car going to be nothing but problems to you if you find a bad one? Well, let's start with the reason you'd want to buy an E46. The way it drives. It's an absolute perler of a car to drive. Now, I would always prefer it as a manual, and yes, this is an automatic. I really wish it was a manual, but I still love driving it. The best bit is the engine. It's a 2.5 litre M54 inline 6 aluminium block engine with 141 kilowatts worth of power, and 0 to 100 comes up in 8.2 seconds in this specific car. It's not that fast. It would be 7.5 in a manual, and the way in which the engine delivers its power is what makes it so special. The yowl of the inline 6, the sound it makes, the way it feels when it accelerates, it's just wonderful. And the other thing that's really good, the handling. Now, I know the smaller engines are lighter, so the 318s do turn better than their much bigger counterparts, but still, every time you turn the wheel in this car into a corner, it just feels so nice. It may not be as poised as the smaller engine car, but it still feels wonderful. It does feel a little nose heavy, given the fact that it's got the bigger inline 6 sitting over the front wheels. And yes, I know it is a rear-wheel drive car, but that extra weight does actually really that extra weight is definitely noticeable when you drive a 4 and a 6 back to back. It's more noticeable in an E36 than this one, but you can still notice it. Back to back, there is better handling and poise in the 4, but the 6's engine more than makes up for that. So dynamically, it's a very good car. Now, the ride's a little bit choppy, although in my car's case, the suspension is quite old and is due to be done, so that's another reason why it may be a bit choppier on my car. But in terms of performance compromise, for this class of car, it's really good. The ride handling compromise of this car is one of its best elements. Another good point about the E46 is the styling. It is a truly beautiful car. It's the last beautiful 3 Series BMW in my eyes. Even though this design is 25 years old now, it's still a wonderful looking car. And the interior is wonderful. It's got this wonderful curved dashboard with wood grain finish on this car, and you can get it with carbon fiber or just silver. And it's a wonderful place to sit in. And the driving position of where you sit in this car is every bit as wonderful as looking at it. It's bang on where you want to be. The pedals are in a good place, the steering wheel's in a good place, the dials are in a good place. The dials are nice, clean, crisp BMW dials of the past. That is black with a white background that turns orange when the lights go on. And as I get to open the tabs up, you can just hear that wonderful engine. Oh, it's such a lovely car. And yes, this might be an old car, but they haven't improved on it. It still drives and rides every bit as well. Okay, mine with its tired suspension in the side, every bit as well as it did all those years ago. And it still outdrives the competition. It still outhandles the competition. Yes, I know the E36s and E30s are much tighter packages, but this is still a fantastic car. So in terms of driving, in terms of appearances, in terms of the way it feels, it's very hard to fault the E46. And that's why they sold so many of them. It's very easy to see. It's such a good car. I can see why it outsold the Ford Mondeo in the UK. I can see why it was one of the best-selling cars throughout Europe during its production run. And of all years they produced the most, it was the year this one was built, 2002, where they sold 531,000 of these things in that year. But where this car might be lovely to drive, might be lovely to sit in and look at, but it definitely has its drawbacks. Number one, it's the build quality. Now this one did sit out in the sun quite a lot in its life, and there are bits of trim that are flaking and falling off. The headliner, when I first got it, was doing the typical BMW Dumbo ear headliner and falling. It is made out of water-based glue, and typical of many water-based glue headliners of 1990s Euro boxes, they drop. Another thing, it's made entirely out of plastic. Everything has little plastic clips everywhere, so if you try and do anything on it, be careful. You might break said plastic clips, and that is quite difficult to replace and expensive at times if you can't get them second-hand. If you're going to buy an E46, may I say, buy either an early 4-cylinder, an M43 pre-facelift, so 98 to 01, or an M54 or M52 TU 6-cylinder. Do not, whatever you do, buy the Valvetronic 2-litre N47 engine. It is known for going kaboom, and kaboom in a big way. These things were trailing plumes of smoke since they were 5 or 6 years old, some of them. Yeah, reliability really isn't one of its strongest points. The other thing to think about though with the 6 is the Vanos system. Now when you start it up and it sounds like a Coke can rattling, that's when you know it's got issues. That means you have to pull the engine apart to deal with the Vanos if it goes. Looking forward to that, are you now? Reliability. And the automatics, well, they are more reliable than their predecessors, and no doubt BMW really didn't care about these. They were more or less, this was a period where Auto BM was the sap that funded the manual customer. No, really, it was. Some of these automatics really aren't the best of friends. This engine, you can tell it would be much better suited to a manual box. It does lose power with this auto box. Other things to think about, E46s brake in the same way. Those faults I've mentioned are what to look for. It may or may not happen. These faults I'm going to mention are almost guaranteed to happen. Now, fault number one, the fuel pump. The Siemens VDO fuel pumps are known for breaking quite often. The Siemens VDO fuel pump dying on this is nearly what put it into the great car yard in the sky. Yes, they fail. They fail often. So if it hasn't had a fuel pump, you can almost bank on the fact you're going to need to change it. Next thing that you need to think about is the coils and plugs. They all like failing as well, and again, you need to change them. Now, these aren't expensive jobs if you know where to get the parts. If you have to buy them from BMW, they're going to be expensive. Quite expensive, actually. Now, given that I buy my parts from Europe, the coils and plugs were about 150 bucks for the whole set, coils and plugs. Not bad. Less than what BMW charge for a single coil in Australia. Yes. The fuel pumps, you can get them online. Again, it'd be about 150 bucks for a fuel pump online. They can be bought very easily. You just need to find someone who knows what they're doing with these things. Again, they don't forgive idiots very nicely, and fit the parts. Okay, those jobs are about $400 or $500 in terms of labour for the fuel pump, and $100 for the coils. So nothing to really be worried about. It's sort of commonplace, common issues. Other issues you need to consider with this car, mass airflow meter, that's another one that likes to go on these things. Another thing that you think about, oil leaks upon oil leaks upon oil leaks. These cars are made out of very brittle plastic, like I said, in the interior, and the sealants used, they can plasticize over time and they can break. Other thing to consider is the radiators. Those things do go wrong. You really need to be careful of the radiator. If the water temperature starts going up on the E46 you're looking at, I'd be looking under the bonnet, or better still, run away. Other things to think about, all the electrical systems, make sure they all work. The satellite navigation screens, they can become granular over time and you can see big little splotches everywhere on them. I would say go for one, typical Euros of this period, go for one with as few electronics as possible. You'll thank yourself when they don't break. So, other things to think about, and this was one that I covered in the interior that I did myself, the final stage resistor. If your E46 isn't blowing cold air or isn't blowing any air at all, that may be due to this part called the final stage resistor. Not an expensive part. I got it online for about 35 euros, which is about 55 bucks. BMW charged 340 bucks for it. But it is an absolute pain in the ass to get out of. I would say pay someone to do it. I did it myself, and that resulted in a lot of shouting and yelling in a language that isn't English. Other thing to look at, the electric windows. The passenger side window is a bit defective on this one. It doesn't like going down or up at all. They like going. Window regulators also aren't expensive. They're reckoned on about 70 bucks for something online. Again, BMW charged 300 for it. Yes. So what I'm getting at here is, yes, it does have its faults. All cars have their faults. And this being a BMW, program destruction stroke, almost guaranteed doing the same thing, so you can at least prepare for it. They're not that expensive if you know where the parts are. Should you buy one? That depends on what you want. If you just want a cheap daily driver that doesn't cost you a lot of money, then might I suggest look elsewhere. This probably isn't the car for you, because they do have lots of little faults. It's not really many big faults, it's lots of little faults, and they take time and effort to sort out. So while I was sorting this thing out, I would certainly have another car. I wouldn't have this as my only car, to put it mildly. I would also be saying, if you're looking at buying one of these as a cheap daily and don't want to maintain it, it'll leave you somewhere, it'll break in such a way that'll cost a lot of money. So that's something you really do need to think about. That's basically what happened with this car. It bit the previous owner very hard. It didn't move, it literally was stuck on a driveway for the best part of 18 months. If you're buying this thing with your eyes open as a petrol head, and as an enthusiast, and are willing to put up with these faults, then yes, you should buy one. So with that in mind, where do they start? Well, if you want an absolute bomb that's a complete project, plenty of them under 2.5 grand. If you want to save one of these things, and if you are a petrol head, I really think you should, save one of these E46s, fix them up, buy it for 2.5 grand, spend about 7 and be left with a car that's 10 grand. Yeah, it's worth it. I think it's worth it. So between 2.5 and 5, that's when you get the somewhat less bomby projects of various engines. So you've 318s, 320s, 325s, 330s don't tend to turn up though under 5 though. So it's from anything that's a 318, 320, 323 with the older 6-cylinder with the M52, or 325. Such a beautiful sound. And it's easy to get taken in when you drive one. Really, really keep your eyes open, because it really is easy to get taken in with an E46 when you take one for a spin, because you'll find just how beautiful of a car it really is. But really, really think this through. 5 to 7 grand mark, that's when the cars that are somewhat complete start turning up. This car here will be in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. So this specific example, if you went to buy one like this, 135 on the clock, you'd be looking at about anywhere from 7 to 9 grand, depending on service history, condition, mileage, and also specification. Now, things that are desirable are the sunroofs. They're a lot more desirable than the non-sunroof cars. 10 grand is about nearly top whack for a sedan, except for a 330. 330's top whack for a 330 is about 12.5, 13 for a really nice one. So coupes start at about 5 for an absolute bomb, and although you're going to need about 7 or 8 to secure a decent early 323 Ci from 1999 or 2000. You're going to need more like 10 to secure a low-ish mileage coupe or convertible with an automatic gearbox. Always make sure the convertible top works and the sunroof. They don't work, you're going to be paying a bit of money to sort those out. Now, the most expensive E46s, apart from the M3s, which we're not going to cover here, as you've probably seen, only covering standard E46s. the most expensive ones of the 325 and 330s are in the high teens. Some people will try and advertise really low mileage cars for as much as 30 grand. Yeah, it's a lot of money. High teens is for a low mileage manual 330 Ci from 2004 to 2006. And yes, it's a lot of money, but I'd still think about buying one. Basically, if you love these cars, like I do, you're going to think about them anywhere in the market. Objectively, the best buy in an E46 is something that would be either a saloon for about 5 to 10, for 5-ish for a 318, and about 7 to 8 for a 325, and a coupe, low 10s, so like 11, 12 grand for a 330 Ci. That's where I see these things working the best. Now, manual or automatic, I would go for a manual personally, but if you find a nice automatic, that'd be a good buy as well. Again, you're not going to find that many nice manuals, many of them get roached out. And there's your thing. While these are lovely cars, many of them aren't bought by lovely people. Many of them get trashed, many of them get abused. That's the thing you need to think about most. Find an example that's been loved. Or if you're buying a bomb, buy it cheap. Buy it really cheap and spend the money to bring it back. They can be brought back. They aren't too complex in terms of computers, but I'm going to say this now definitively. If you want an E46, if you're going to buy a bit of a rough one, pay rough money for it. If you're going to buy a good one, then really go through them. You may find the good one is an automatic. Manuals take a lot of effort to find. I should know this. I spent years looking for a manual. I still haven't finished that mission yet. But anywhere you go, anywhere you look, it's a fun car. It's worth owning. And that is why I love it so much. And that's why I say, if you love cars and you want a car that you enjoy owning, you've got to own an E46. You really do. If you want a cheap daily, go find something a bit more forgiving. I don't like seeing these things go to scrapyards. I really do love them. It's a car that's close to my heart, and if you get one, it'll be close to yours too. Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, remember to like and subscribe.